Your outdoor lights are literally confusing your plants. They don't know whether it's winter, spring, summer, or fall. They're kind of having a botanical identity crisis. Most people think landscape lighting is just about making lights look pretty at night, but there's a secret science behind where you place those lights. And today, we're going to discuss lighting placement rules that'll save your plants and your wallet. It's time to smash that like button and hit subscribe because I'm planting seeds of truth that'll make your neighbors wonder how your yard looks so fine. And now, let's do some landscaping on the radio. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I am here with you to talk gardening, landscaping, all of your indoor and outdoor living ideas. Let's talk about lighting for a second. Whenever you come up to a really nice house and it has lighting, there's just like, oh, this is so romantic. It's so nice. But did you know that landscape lighting could pose a bit of a problem? And that is, it can trick your plants not knowing what in the world is going on. So I'm going to totally butcher this word, but it is called anthocyanins, and I don't know what it's called. But anyway, what happens is that there's these chemicals that happen within plants when it's getting too much light, and it fools the plants, and the plants don't understand what's going on. That's why you could have a plant flowering at a time of the year when it's not supposed to be flowering, or maybe it's not flowering enough. You look in the neighborhood and you go, wow, that jacaranda tree, that's just loaded, but mine, what's happening with it? Why is it only a quarter of what that is? Or maybe it's a crepe myrtle. That's probably one of the biggest ones that I've ever seen, to where crepe myrtle is like, oh, they're just gorgeous, beautiful flowers. There's pinks, whites, and reds, but mine is so puny and ugly, and it's not happening, and that could be because the plants are being tricked. So, what do we need to do to adjust our lighting to make sure that this doesn't happen? Well, first and foremost, the lighting is supposed to be a more of a highlight than the actual lighting. You're not there to create a baseball field or football field or soccer field to where it's blasting down on the players or your landscape in this case, to where there's no shadows. You see, what you're doing with your landscape lighting is that you're strategically putting it so that there are shadows and there are certain things that are lit. Downlighting is really important. So you would maybe put your lighting inside your trees to go downward on your trunk. That's not going to hurt the tree because your trunk isn't looking for any kind of photosynthesis, because the photosynthesis happens within the leaves of the plant. So point it downwards to that. But understand that depending on how wide and broad that light is, that could be a problem to any underlying plants. You're only using this stuff for highlighting. Of course, when you're talking about lighting is so important for a number of things. First, it is just so important for pathways, so you don't fall down and go boom. It's important for driveways, so you don't hit your neighbor's mailbox. It's important to put towards maybe a door so you can see the boogeyman before you go inside your house. So the lighting is just for effects. It's not for the ball games. In fact, even at ball games, afterwards, they have sense enough to turn the lights off. And of course, there's no trees over there. There's just grass. And if the truth was known, grass is a little bit different. It doesn't need as much rest. It doesn't need as much rest as the rest of the landscape. So that being said, make sure that you're very strategic in how you put your lighting. Now, there's also a thing that you can do, and we normally don't think of it in this way. First off, lighting companies are all different. Some lighting companies use the halogen lights. They use the lights that are not in, they'll use incandescent lights. They'll use lights that are old school. Okay? And that right there are typically lights that are very bright. In fact, even LED lights are bright white lights. Now, we're not talking about the heat, we're talking about the brightness. You may want to turn that kind of thing down and not worry about the brightness aspect of it as you would against something that's a little bit on the duller side, something that's not a bright white, something that has a more of a mellow look to it. Look, it's dark. And when it's dark, you don't need the bright light because it's dark. Okay, you could use something that's much more mellow to put on the lights, something that's not as bright and is diffused. And then the other thing is, I've kind of alluded to it already. It all depends on how big that fan of light is. Some of them are just directional, some are fan shaped, there's just different shapes and styles of lights and how you're going to project them. So that's important as well. So to get your plants back on track, to get them so that they can bloom better, so they can rest, so they can go through their proper life cycle, you may want to consider all of these things that we talked about so that your landscape could shine the way it's supposed to shine and not be overwhelmed with too much light. All right, that's the way that we do that because that's just super important there. So, you know what the other thing is? You can take and you can put reflectors on these lights. And then, of course, you always want to put a timer on them. It's rare when you can't find a timer. You know what else I like doing? Solar lights. Now, I have solar lights in my backyard. I got tons of solar. But you know what they are? They're big old lights like this. And they shine. My backyard looks like a football field. But that's because I go out in the middle of the night and I'm tending to my garden. Totally different. And they shut off 15 seconds after I leave.